Just recently, CIA launched a campaign in China to find CCP party members who are willing to provide information on party's future plans. To counter this threat, CCP launched its own program to get CIA agents to turn against the United States. That's why today I reached out to a former CIA spy to talk about how agencies and countries operate, how they get each other's agents to turn against their country. Let's listen in. It was definitely an insightful conversation. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have Andrew Bustamante with me. He's a former CIA officer, and on top of that, he has a new book coming out this September, on September 9th, Shadow Shell. I know it's showing opposite. We'll put the book on the screen. And Andrew, excited to talk to you and really hyped about the book.
No, I appreciate it, Sam. Thanks for the time, and I love your content, so I'm stoked to get into it.
Perfect. So, at least from my point of view, the main theme of the book seems to be, or the main message is that you're trying to tell people spying, espionage, it's not a single player game. It's a team game. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the big misunderstandings about espionage comes from Hollywood and mainstream media that make people think that spying is a one-person man versus world superhero kind of thing, where you have to be James Bond or Jason Bourne to go out there and spy, when in reality, spies are much more like everyday people than they are like A-list celebrities. They're a little overweight. They're a little bit, anxious. They sunburn in too much sunlight. They're not perfect shots. Real life spies are so much more interesting because they're very real and very real life people. And that's what I wanted to get across in my memoir. Explain a real spy operation through the lens, through the eyes of real people.
Now, I know a lot of people don't understand this, but is this something CIA did not want coming out? Because I know you have talked about this a lot, where you had a lot of headaches. I don't know if you would call them headaches, but a lot of issues with CIA in talking about this book and talking about everything you've talked about in the book.
Absolutely. So I actually finished this manuscript in 2021. And then I spent 3 years trying to get CIA to approve the book for release. In 2022, CIA said the book from cover to cover in its entirety, was to be considered a classified document that would never see the light of day and never be released. Within 2.5 years of arguing, of debating, and then ultimately threatening CIA with a First Amendment lawsuit, they finally accepted that the book is legally publishable and that we had the right to publish it and share it with the world.
Now, coming back to the team thing that you talked about, you know how in football you have different positions. You have quarterback, you have running back, offensive linemen. Maybe you could talk about what does a spying team look like, or maybe it differs depending on what you're doing.
Yes, it's a great comparison, actually, comparing a football team with a team of spies, because it's not that different. Yes, you do have a primary, what's known as a core collector, who goes out into the field to meet with human targets and collect secrets. That's your core collector. But right behind the core collector, making everything they do possible, is a mission planner, or what's known as an operations officer. And then just beside them, you've got a targeter on one side, you've got an analyst on the other side. And then as you go down the line, you have linguists, you have disguise people, you have logisticians, you have finance people, you have interpreters and translators, and the team is quite massive, and nobody really realizes that everybody has to work together to get to the place where the core collector is even able to go overseas in an alias, in disguise, to target a certain individual.
Perfect. And coming back to the book, the main focus is there's a mole in the CIA, which is scary to hear, at least for me. And then you're sent to a foreign country which you cannot name. Am I allowed to guess here? You cannot confirm or deny.
Exactly right. You can guess all you want, but I can neither confirm.
I have case. So you go to this foreign country, which is not a friendly country, Falcon. And what my question was like, this mole, he was a CIA officer who turned. What makes people turn, especially in CIA? And I'm sure as someone who's been in the field, you've tried getting other people to turn against their country. How do you aim to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's not one that people often think about. When you try to imagine what it's like to become a traitor against your own country, what is it like to be a military officer, an FBI officer, a CIA officer that then trades secrets, sells your secrets to the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians? I think we're too busy villainizing those people to actually try to empathize with those people. And really, the reason that they are committing treason is based in empathy. There's something lacking, something sad, something hurtful, something angry in their life, and they truly believe that treason is how they will fix it. And that's exactly how we get foreign officers to turn coat against their country and help us in the United States as well. It's all about understanding people's emotion, people's human behavioral patterns, and then getting them to sympathize and believe that treason is their best option for fixing the thing that bothers them.
I think what you just explained kind of applies to Edward Snowden. And I don't know if you want to talk about him, but he's a controversial figure, especially in the United States, because when I was in college here, I thought what he did was something good. But as I learned more about it, as I grew up, I realized like situation is a lot more complicated than it seemed like when you're young. And I feel like a lot of my friends still think, oh, what he did was 100% correct. He should have done that. How do you look at that? And was he someone who went to Russia after he realized that the US government is not going to protect him because of what he did? Or was he someone who was like already turned? Russia was like pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Yeah, and these are, a great way to look at this is through the lens of the Snowden debacle. For whatever reason, Edward Snowden believed that the best way to fix what he believed was NSA overreach was by basically taking the story public. Even though he had signed secrecy agreements, and even though he had been vetted, and even though he promised to keep these things secret, he chose to make them public. Not just public, but he chose to make them public in a foreign newspaper. And then he chose to flee from country to country that was an enemy of the United States, ultimately until he landed in Russia, where he gained Russian citizenship. I don't know about you, but in no way do I think a hero would sell their secrets to a foreign newspaper and then flee by way of enemy states all the way until they become Russian citizens. It just doesn't seem like something you would do if you truly believe that what you're doing was the best thing for your country. Instead, I believe that Snowden had some kind of frustration, some sort of issue, some vulnerability. It could have been money, it could have been personal pride, it could have been ego, it could have been just, professional frustration with his role as a contractor at NSA. The list is limitless about what could have set him off, but ultimately he believed treason was going to solve the problem.
For sure. And that's what I mean by like, I have changed my mind, because when I was young, I didn't really look into it. It's just like what you heard from other people. But once I started looking into it, it's like, let's say he did all this thing because some principle that he stands for. You don't go to Russia, a country where those principles just don't exist. And then I think I learned this from you recently when I was listening to one of your podcasts. He's been awarded medals in Russia, heroes and medals and stuff. So it just doesn't seem like he's standing up for principles that he claims he's standing up for.
Exactly right. If he was exercising democratic values, there are dozens of democratic countries that would gladly welcome him and protect him, because they would believe that the United States is acting in a way that is illegal to human rights and to individual freedoms. But he knew that that's not what he did. He knew that he violated many, many laws and rules, even gentlemen's rules, right? Even being a sworn intelligence officer or a vetted intelligence contributor, you can't violate certain rules. It just makes you untrustworthy for life.
And probably put a lot of people you may know at risk doing what he did.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, America will never know the true extent of Snowden's damage, because as he fled from country to country, he continued to give secrets away. We only know him for what he whistle-blew to the Guardian newspaper, right? What the collection of metadata against American citizens in pursuit of the Patriot Act. That's what we all know about. But what the average American doesn't understand is every time he caught a plane or moved from country to country, he was paying his way with more secrets. He was giving more secrets about NSA away. He was undermining more operations. And as a result of that, NSA had to dump operations, recreate operations, rejuvenate, restructure operations in an effort to try to keep Americans safe, because every step of the way, Snowden was taking our safety away.
No, yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's true, especially for like trading for citizenship and stuff and protection in Russia. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, another person who's been very popular in like intelligence community conspiracies is Jeffrey Epstein. Now, you've talked about him a lot, so I'm not going to just repeat the same questions you've heard, but I do want to just get your thoughts on what you think. Was he working with some agency, or was he like full-on agent? Like he was created by some agency. But the interesting question that I have is, how common is it the rich people, the powerful people, are working with their country's agency or some other country's agency?
It's a great question. So I would say that it's actually more common than people understand that wealthy people support intelligence operations. And it makes sense because most wealthy people are also very patriotic towards their country. And they became successful not because they were good at many things, but because they were good at one thing. And when your government, when your country comes to you and says, hey, you are the best at making tires, you are the best at creating some sort of widget, you are the best at canned tuna. When they come and say, you are the best in our country, we need your help, what American would say no? What American is going to say, you know what, not interested? Especially not when you could become the new guy who signs a contract with the federal government so they buy all your canned tuna. It's like the Elon Musk situation. Do you think Elon Musk was helping Donald Trump because Elon loves America? No. Elon wanted Tesla and SpaceX to be the #1 contractors for the US federal government for the next 4 years plus. He saw dollar signs, he saw government contracts in his cooperation. So it's very common for wealthy people to want to support the United States. The difference with Epstein is that in order to support the United States from a position of security, you have to be legal in your activities. Epstein was illegal in his activities. He was illegally offshoring money. He was illegally transferring and trafficking people. So the United States has no way of working with a man like that. The CIA has no way of working with somebody who is breaking American law. And that's because CIA falls under the executive branch, which means under the executive branch of government, we have to only work with law-abiding Americans. But the Department of Justice, which falls under the justice branch, the second completely different branch, the judicial branch of government, they can work with criminals, and they do work with criminals. So it's my theory that Jeffrey Epstein was actually a FBI asset, what's known as a CI, which is a confidential informant, and he was ratting out people who were working with him to smuggle money and to hide, or smuggle children and hide money. He was giving those criminal activities to the FBI in exchange for forgiveness or for immunity of his own case. That's a much more likely explanation of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, just probabilities if we don't know the whole details, right? Correct. But this is where actually I'm a bit confused, because you said CIA cannot break laws, but I think you talk about in other podcasts, maybe in the book too, where I don't even know if you can say this on YouTube, we'll bleep it out. You have used it to, like if in a foreign country, you want to get it in with someone who wants it, you would give that, which is that not considered breaking the law?
So it's a great question, because the CIA cannot break American laws. If we break American laws, we have to be given a very specific type of approval from the judicial system. Every other law outside of the United States, we don't recognize that as law. So in your example about, right, it's nasty, nobody likes it, I wish it didn't exist. However, if you think about it practically, if there's some rich Kuwaiti who wants it, and the Germans just had a police raid where they were able to capture a bunch of that was made by the Romanians, but they captured it in Germany, there's no reason why CIA can't ask the German BND to give us some of the, so that we can use it in Kuwait to win secrets. None of that touches American citizens. None of that touches American bankroll. None of that touches American anything except American principles. And I would argue the plan was already made, already captured, and already useful. So why not use it to keep Americans safe rather than just burn it in a trash can?
I guess. I'm sure some people have issues with it, but I think this is where it's important. CIA's role is to just protect American citizens from any threat. They don't care about anything else.
That's exactly right, yeah. We call it a level of moral flexibility. You can believe things are right and wrong, but at the end of the day, what you believe has to come second to what's required to keep Americans safe.
Perfect. And now coming back to the book, this is a book you wrote with your wife, right? She's right here, Jihi. And you met her in CIA. I think, I'm not sure 100%, I think during training or maybe during operations. Maybe you can clarify that. And this is an interesting, I guess, point that many people don't think about, because we cover China, Russia a lot. And recently, I think when President Trump came in office, there was a new law for all the US embassy workers in China that they cannot have any relations with anyone in China, like any Chinese girl. I'm guessing guy too, if it's a woman. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because from the outside, or at least from the movies, which again, probably not the most best way to get the information. From the movies, it seems like dating and like sexual encounters is like the weakest point where you can attack an agent who's in the field.
When it comes to Americans, that's for sure true. America has a very strange relationship with sex. And it's funny because some people tell me that they think the United States is very sexually open. I mean, we have, and anybody can access it and it's easy to find. But the truth is, America is actually a very reserved, almost suppressed sexual country. If you think about Japan, where you can literally buy used panties out of a vending machine, or if you think about Europe, where you walk down the street and see undergarment advertisements that are on naked models, right? We're very, very different than that in the United States. And as a result, our idea of what is sexually appropriate and not appropriate is very malleable. So foreign countries will often take advantage of Americans' sexual awkwardness and use it against us. And that's how we get honey trap operations, and that's how you get people who have sexual exploitation operations. And that is the reason why the US government has these things called non-frat countries. What you're talking about with Donald Trump's rule that Chinese embassy workers in Beijing can't have relations with Chinese nationals is exactly that. It's because we have to set non-fraternization rules to protect Americans from their own awkward sexual ideas. We have several non-frat countries. Russia is a non-frat country. Iran is a non-frat country. China, North Korea, Belarus, and every other agency has 5 or 7 more specific non-frat countries, which means you can have no friends, no relations, no sexual encounters with anybody from these countries unless you report it immediately and terminate the relationship from that point forward. So what's that mean? Sam, if you're traveling through Turkey and a smoking hot Iranian girl convinces you to go bang it out for the night, everybody in the US government says, go have a good time, but tell your boss about it in the morning and fill out some paperwork so you don't go to jail. That's what it means to be in a non-frat country.
Okay, I saw this tweet, and I don't know if this is accurate, but apparently they tell everyone in the law enforcement, not law enforcement, like the agencies, where if you're a 4 or 5 and a 10 walks up to you, just know you're being honeypot.
That's exactly right. And most people in the intelligence world are not good-looking people. Most of us are very average-looking people because average-looking people get forgotten. A guy with a small belly and a girl with thinning hair and, people who are awkwardly, short and awkwardly tall. These are all people that nobody remembers. It's when you're smoking hot. It's when people think you belong in front of a camera, or they believe that you belong on a stage, or you look like Mr. and Mrs. Universe, right? That's when you get remembered. And nobody wants to be remembered when they're a professional intel officer.
That makes sense. Now, coming back to the book, actually, and I highly recommend anyone who's watching, if you're watching it, it's September 9th, you can get the book by using the link in the description. But in the book, you talk about a mole in the CIA. We discussed that. But I think you hinted that your operation gets exposed, or you get exposed because of the mole. And I want to focus on how do they communicate and how do you communicate? Like if you were to send something back to the United States, and how did this mole let whoever he is, like whatever the country intelligence is, how did he let them know that, hey, someone's there? Does he just say someone's there? Is he telling them your alias, which is like Alex something? I'm forgetting the name. Or he's Hernandez, Andrew. Is he sending a photo? Like, how does the communication work with the moles and everything like that?
Yeah, I love this question, and nobody has ever asked it before, Sam, so I really appreciate it. So when 2 people communicate in secret, they communicate clandestinely. So we call clandestine communication ClanComm. And there's all kinds of different forms of ClanComm. Some ClanComm is literally an operating system that you load to your phone. And it looks like a normal app, but in fact, it's reinforced and it's air-gapped and it's completely separate encryption. So now I can communicate with you from what looks like a normal app on my phone, but if anybody ever accesses my phone, they can't get into that folder. They can't get into those messages. Kind of like Snapchat used to be when it would like delete things. So some ClanCom can be on your phone. Other ClanCom can be on the internet. You can go to a website and you can log into a website just like you would log into your Amazon account, only what you're really logging into is a cloud interface somewhere, and your handler is on the opposite side of that cloud somewhere, and you have clandestine communication that way. But then you also have all the old school ways of ClanCom where dead drops and encrypted messages that you literally write on paper with invisible ink, or you write in plain text on water-soluble paper that will melt as soon as it touches water. These are all forms of communication. So when it came to Scimitar is the code name for the mole that we were hunting, or the mole that's in our book. The way that Scimitar would often meet with his handlers, you'll actually see in the book, sometimes they would text message him, send him a message via text. It's classified whether that text message was on a clan system or whether it was a commercial encryption system like Signal or WhatsApp, or whether it was plain text to his phone. We can't discuss those details, but we know messages came in via his phone and he responded to messages via his phone. And oftentimes the content of those messages was just to set a personal meeting where the two of them could meet somewhere in private. And then once they met in private, we also know that Scimitar was giving them pictures, printouts, written notes, as well as verbal information that was compromising U.S. intelligence officers, covert locations, operational goals and ambitions. He was really giving a lot away. What we can share is limited because a lot of it is still classified. But you're exactly right to be asking, how does the communication work? Because in many ways, depending on the operation, depending on the officers, depending on how long they have to go without talking to each other at a period of time. Sometimes you have to wait 3 days, sometimes you have to wait 3 months before you can send a message. All of those lead to a different type of clandestine communication.
Okay, that leads to two questions. First of all, the mole, has he seen your face around like the FBI or CIA office? Like, is that a common thing where most CIA agents know each other? Or is it like most actually don't know each other, don't know they exist, what they're doing, what their faces are?
Yeah, it's actually so interesting. Most CIA officers don't know other CIA officers. You might know the 15 or 20 people that you work with the most, but even inside CIA headquarters, we don't call each other by our real names. We're given a name that is our CIA administrative name. So inside the hallways of CIA, we call each other by a different name. And then whenever we write a report, we actually sign our report in the same name that we use administratively. So even when you're reading about something that a CIA officer did, you're not reading their real name. And it takes multiple levels of kind of administrative security clearance before you can get to a real person's name. So not only do you not see their face very often, if at all, because CIA officers are all over the world, but when you read about their activities, you're reading about them in a completely different name. So when it came to how Scimitar was able to compromise Alex Hernandez when I was operating overseas, we have to assume that what he was able to track down was not my face, but my name. And if he found the name Alex Hernandez, he could likely find the passport and the other, what we call alias documentation. He could likely find the other alias docs assigned to Alex Hernandez and then give those as data, searchable data, to the Falcon Intelligence Service.
Makes sense. Now, the second question follow-up to this whole thing is, you had a business in Falcon, right? Because I'm guessing we did not have an embassy or mission. Now, am I wrong in pulling on this thread? Whereas like most of the handlers, like the handler Scimitar had here in the United States, they work out of the embassy or mission, or is that not accurate at all?
Yeah, no, it seems like it's very accurate because that's how things worked during the Cold War. But from the beginning of 9/11, we completely transformed our operational process. So are you wrong to assume that some intelligence activity happens out of embassies? Not really. But are you wrong to assume that most or all of it does? That would be a bit of an overstatement.
Even for other countries? Like, or
even
just
for
for
other
you?
countries. Correct. I mean, if you think about it, some of the most hostile intelligence services operating in the United States aren't doing it out of embassies. They're doing it out of shell companies. They're doing it out of hidden police stations. They're doing it out of expat networks, right? Anytime you're in a Chinatown or a little Japan town or even like a Russian enclave, you've got to worry about intelligence operations.
And the book opens with you talking about how you're being followed, and then that day you're not being followed, where you're like, is this the good news where it's like they don't think I'm a spy, or is this the bad news where I cannot see who, like, if they're following me or not? Is that common in most countries where, like, if you're a foreigner, you're being followed? Or is that something like they suspected you were someone important?
So for an American citizen traveling abroad, one of the things that Americans often forget is that we are the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world. So when an American shows up at a hotel overseas, people notice. People notice, especially if you're an American that shows up in a very poor place. If you show up in someplace in Africa or some parts of Latin America or even parts of Western Europe, they notice when you show up and you're well-fed and you have a groomed beard and you have a nice watch and your shoes look nice and you're wearing, you're carrying a Versace clutch and you're wearing a suit that's got Hugo Boss on it. Like, people notice all these status symbols, especially in countries where there aren't many wealthy people. And as a result of that, it's common in most poor countries that people will voluntarily follow you because they want to learn about you so they can sell your information to the police service, or they can sell your information to a criminal organization. And the criminal organization or the police can shake you down for bribes, rob from your hotel room, mug you on the street. But all that to say that it's actually very common for American citizens to fall under surveillance overseas and not even realize it. In fact, I've had several friends of mine who have traveled for business, and then they're almost embarrassed to say, I think someone may have been following me in my hotel. They're so embarrassed because they don't know how to test it. They don't know how to run a surveillance detection route that would confirm it, but they know that there was someone awkward who just kept showing up, or there was always someone awkward who stood outside the front door of the meeting, the office where they kept having meetings. Many people have had this happen to them and they've just never known what it was.
Now, I think we had a House representative, or some podcaster recently confirmed where they went on a friendly trip to Israel and they had someone go through their luggage at the hotel, and then he confirmed with other people who have been to Israel before, and he was basically told, like, yeah, that's a common thing in Israel. Why did they do that? Especially if someone's friendly.
Israel's not friendly. This is important for people to understand. Israel is not a friendly country to the United States. Israel understands that the United States needs Israel for geopolitical reasons, and Israel also understands that the United States isn't honest with Israel. So if you think about some of the biggest spy cases in the United States where an American became a traitor, was when an American became a traitor to give secrets to Israel, because Israel's able to leverage Judaism. Israel's able to leverage Jewish or Israeli heritage. There's lots of places that Israel can leverage manipulation over American targets. Meanwhile, American targets don't really spy on Israel because we don't think that Israel's enemies are really our enemies. Israel focuses very much on the 5 or 7 threat that are trying to wipe it off the map, right? Extremist threats, Iranian threats. That's what Israel's focused on, whereas the United States is focused on everything else. So we don't often try to spy in Israel, and we're always very aware that Israel's always trying to spy on us.
And it's not just the U.S. that lies. Wasn't it Israel who kept it hidden that they were having a nuclear program? So Israel lies to U.S. a lot too.
Exactly.
It's not just a one-way.
It's not a one-way thing at all. And there's a famous quote out there in the world of diplomacy that says, there are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests, which is just a nice way of saying you can't trust anybody. Everybody's here to protect themselves at any given moment, and you either help protect them or they're going to steal from you to protect themselves.
Yep, that's the banner we have because it's a geopolitics channel. So yeah. Now, in the book, you've had you had a close call of getting caught, getting exposed and stuff. Do you go through training or protocol? It's like, if you're about to get caught, this is what you should do. If you're caught, are you supposed to, like, end it? Hopefully you get what I mean. Like, you know how we see it in the movie where they carry something in the necklace, where it's like, better to get caught than be tortured.
Right. Cyanide, yeah.
Yeah.
So the movies, again, they over exaggerate. There are certain groups that will carry tools to kill themselves, right? But you have to be in a very, very sensitive, very dangerous circumstance for that. If you just think about it logically, a single CIA officer traveling and working abroad is worth about $2.5 million in training time, just in training cost.
Yeah.
And then the information that they bring back is virtually priceless, because they bring back secrets that prevent terrorist attacks, and they bring back secrets that give you an edge in the next G20 summit, and they bring back secrets that help you prevent China from growing in Somalia. So the secrets that a CIA officer brings back are incredibly valuable. So the last thing you want is for some itchy, anxious CIA officer to accidentally bite their cyanide tablet that's hidden in their back molar, because now you just lost $2.5 million in investment plus an incredible amount of money in opportunity costs because this person couldn't help but, bite their lip. So we don't use that. Instead, we rely on training that prepares us for each level of capture. Here's how you identify if you're being followed, for example. We talk about that in Shadow Cell quite a bit. Here's what a surveillance detection route looks like to identify your surveillance. And then here's how you identify whether or not your surveillance is increasing or decreasing in sophistication. Because don't forget, a surveillance could look like a pot-bellied man with armpit stains sitting outside of your hotel room, but it could also look like a drone that's 25,000 feet in the air that's watching your cell phone signal and you have no idea it's even there. So surveillance can come in all shapes and sizes, and you have to know how to identify it, and you have to know, if you are under surveillance, how to track if it's increasing or decreasing. So then, of course, we also go through training for how to evade capture, how to fight capture, how to withstand capture, and then how to counter-interrogate, how to interrogate in a way that maximizes your endurance, how to escape when you're under incarceration, and how to flee across the country in what we call a self-exfil or a self-escape. And then, of course, also how to prepare for a forced exfil, which means, a Delta Force or a SEAL team comes in and rescues you.
So yeah, it's a couple of questions that lead to from this. And I think one of the things that you've talked about before, Q, they teach you how to basically not talk negative to yourself in CIA, correct? Which is extremely important when you're on the field. And I feel like that's probably something that'd be useful to just normal people like me. So maybe you can share, what did they teach you? How do you avoid that?
It's funny. That's exactly why I started the company that I have, Everyday Spy. And it's a big part of why I wrote Shadow Cell, because I wanted people to understand there are lots of things that CIA trains us that are not secrets. There are lots of skills that we have that the American public should and could have. It's just that CIA officers don't normally come out and share the things they learned about at CIA. So to your point, we try to avoid negative self-talk. It's almost impossible because you have, on average, 60,000 thoughts a day. Of those 60,000 thoughts, 80% of those 60,000 thoughts are automatic, right? It's like, I have to pee, so you go pee. Or I'm hungry, so you look for food. Most of those thoughts are automatic. Of the remaining 20% of those thoughts, 80% of your 20% are negative, self-conscious thoughts. My breath smells bad. I'm too fat. These shoes don't fit my feet right. I wonder if that lady's looking at the mole on my face. We have all these negative thoughts. We only really have a few thousand positive thoughts in a day. And those few thousand possible positive thoughts out of 60,000 thoughts are what essentially determine whether or not we're depressed or whether we're productive. So to your point, CIA teaches us to recognize we have negative thoughts so that we can combat those negative thoughts. So that when you sit there and you're like, I don't like my smile looks awkward, you still smile, because you have to smile to make other people feel like you're safe. If you hide your smile because you're afraid of your teeth, people don't know that you're self-conscious about your teeth. They just think that you're hiding something, and you don't want people to think that you're hiding something. So we have to learn to accept that whatever negative thoughts we're having, we can have them and they're not relevant to the current mission.
I'm going to clip it up and listen to it every few weeks. I think that's very useful. Another thing, when you were walking out, I think at the airport, you got pulled aside for interrogation and you talked somewhere where you used a lot of techniques that you have learned. I'm guessing from the other side where you probably trained for interrogation, or maybe they train you both sides where if you're on that side of the table, this is what you should do if you're on this side. And I feel like that also could be used at interviews, dates, just networking. A lot of places people can use it in normal life. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Part 2 of this conversation is available on our brand new podcast channel that you can watch right now by clicking the end screen on your screen. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on that channel because we'll be publishing a lot more podcasts like this one.